On February 14, 1993, a group of children playing near railway tracks in Liverpool made a horrifying discovery. Initially mistaking it for a broken doll, they were horrified to realize it was the body of a young boy, partially clothed and severely injured. This was James Bulger, a 2-year-old who had been missing for 2 days. The sight left the children screaming and running for help, forever scarred by the gruesome scene. Authorities quickly arrived and cordoned off the area, initiating what would become one of the most infamous investigations in British history. As news of James Bulger's death spread, Liverpool was plunged into mourning and outrage. Flowers, toys, and notes of sympathy began to pile up near the railway tracks where his body was found. The media extensively covered the tragedy, calling it one of the most heinous crimes in modern British history. Investigators quickly identified that this was no accident. The injuries James sustained, coupled with the positioning of his body, pointed to a deliberate and horrific act of violence. With pressure mounting from the public, police vowed to find the perpetrators and deliver justice for James. February 12, 1993 was an ordinary day for Denise Bulger and her son James. They visited a shopping center in Liverpool for errands. James, a curious and lively 2-year-old, wandered around as his mother shopped. At one moment, Denise let go of his hand to pay for her groceries, and in those fleeting seconds, James disappeared. Panic gripped Denise as she searched every aisle, calling out his name. Store security was alerted, and an announcement for James was made, but he was nowhere to be found. What seemed like a simple case of a lost child soon took a dark and unexpected turn. Investigators turned to the shopping center's security footage, hoping for a lead. What they found was chilling. The cameras captured 2 young boys, approximately 10 years old, leading James by the hand. The trio walked out of the shopping center and disappeared from view. Authorities released the footage to the public, pleading for information. The sight of James innocently holding hands with his abductors shocked the nation. Who were these boys? And why would they target a defenseless 2-year-old? This disturbing video became the turning point of the investigation, sparking a citywide manhunt for the unknown children. Tips started flooding into the police after the footage was broadcast. Witnesses recalled seeing 3 children wandering the streets, with the youngest, James, visibly distressed. Some even noticed the older boys hitting James, but assumed it was a sibling dispute. The trail led to a canal where a witness saw the boys attempting to throw James into the water. Frustrated but determined, police pieced together these sightings and deduced the path taken by the trio. Time was running out, and with every passing hour, the hope of finding James alive diminished. On February 14, a railway worker stumbled upon James's lifeless body near the tracks. The scene was harrowing. James had been brutally beaten, his small frame covered in injuries. Detectives determined that the perpetrators attempted to stage his death as an accident by leaving him on the tracks. The details were too grim to ignore. Paint splashed on his face, bricks and a heavy iron bar used as weapons. James's death was not quick, and the horror of what he endured gripped the hearts of everyone who heard the news. The investigation now shifted to catching the killers. The investigation reached a critical moment when a woman contacted the police with a crucial tip. She recognized one of the boys in the security footage as her neighbor, John Venables. John, along with his friend Robert Thompson, had been absent from school on the day James disappeared. Police acted swiftly, visiting both boys' homes. At Robert's house, they discovered a pair of shoes stained with blood, and at John's, a jacket smeared with blue paint. The evidence was damning, and both boys were brought in for questioning. During separate interrogations, both boys initially denied involvement, but their stories began to crumble under the weight of evidence. John was the first to break down, admitting that they had taken James from the shopping center. He tried to shift the blame, claiming Robert was the instigator. Robert, in turn, accused John of planning everything. Piece by piece, the horrifying truth emerged. How they lured James away, led him across the city, and subjected him to unimaginable cruelty. The nation was stunned to learn that 2 10-year-olds were capable of such a monstrous act. The revelation that the perpetrators were mere children sent shockwaves through Britain and beyond. The media descended on the story, dissecting every detail of John and Robert's lives. Their young ages prompted fierce debates about how society, schools, and families had failed them. Were they victims of their upbringing, or were they inherently evil? The case sparked outrage and fear, with many questioning how such darkness could reside in children so young. Headlines painted John and Robert as monsters, fueling a public thirst for justice. The trial of John Venables and Robert Thompson began on November 1, 1993 at Preston Crown Court. The courtroom had to be specially adapted for the boys, with raised seats to allow them to see over the bench. Both boys appeared small and vulnerable, a stark contrast to the heinous acts they were accused of committing. Prosecutors argued that despite their age, John and Robert knew the gravity of their actions. Chilling evidence, including CCTV footage, witness testimonies, and forensic findings, was presented. The trial captivated the nation, dividing public opinion on whether these boys deserve punishment or rehabilitation. The trial brought to light harrowing details of the crime, leaving the courtroom and the nation polarized. Some argued that John and Robert, as children, were victims of neglect and dysfunctional families. Others believed their actions were irredeemable and called for the harshest punishment possible. Experts testified about the boys' mental states, pointing out their calculated cruelty despite their young age. Families of the victims and the accused clashed in public debates, while protesters gathered outside the courthouse demanding justice for James. The case became a painful reflection of society's failures in its struggle to balance justice and compassion. On November 24, 1993, after 3 weeks of testimony and deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. John Venables and Robert Thompson were found guilty of abducting and murdering James Bulger. They were sentenced to a minimum of 8 years in custody, making them the youngest convicted murderers in modern British history. The judge described their crime as an act of unparalleled evil and barbarity. The courtroom was tense as the verdict was delivered, with James's family breaking down in tears. The public reaction was mixed, with some questioning whether the punishment was sufficient for such a heinous crime. John and Robert were sent to separate secure units designed for juvenile offenders. There they received therapy, education, and protection from the outside world. Their lives in custody were vastly different from their troubled upbringings, with structured routines and access to recreation. However, the public remained outraged, believing the conditions were too lenient. Many argued that James's short life and suffering deserved harsher retribution. Meanwhile, the boys continued to display contrasting behaviors in custody. John expressed remorse, while Robert remained distant and cold. Their progress was closely monitored as debates raged on about their eventual release. James's parents, Denise and Ralph Bulger, were devastated by their son's death and vowed to fight for justice. They campaigned tirelessly to extend John and Robert's sentences, arguing that 8 years was insufficient. Their efforts garnered widespread support, with over 280,000 people signing a petition. This public outcry led to the Home Secretary increasing the minimum sentence to 15 years. However, this decision was overturned by a judicial review, sparking further anger and disappointment among James's supporters. The family's battle highlighted the deep scars left by the tragedy and the challenges of navigating a complex legal system. In 2001, after serving 8 years, John Venables and Robert Thompson were released from custody. Both were given new identities and lifelong anonymity to protect them from public backlash. This decision sparked intense anger across the nation. Many argued that their punishment did not fit the gravity of their crime and feared they would reoffend. While Robert disappeared from the public eye, John's behavior continued to draw attention. The controversial release reignited debates about justice, forgiveness, and whether rehabilitation could truly reform individuals who committed such heinous acts as children. Despite his new identity and the opportunity for a fresh start, John Venables continued to make headlines for all the wrong reasons. In 2010, he was arrested for possessing child abuse materials, leading to his reincarceration. This was followed by another arrest in 2018 for similar offenses. Each time, the public's outrage reignited, questioning whether Venables had ever been truly rehabilitated. His repeated offenses reinforced fears that his release had been a mistake, casting a long shadow over the justice system's ability to handle juvenile offenders. The lifelong anonymity granted to John and Robert has remained a controversial topic. Critics argue that their identities should be public, allowing communities to protect themselves. Supporters of anonymity counter that exposure could lead to vigilante justice and compromise their safety. Cases of mistaken identity, have already led to innocent people being targeted. This tension highlights the ethical dilemma. How much protection should society afford to those who committed atrocities, even as children? The secrecy surrounding their lives continues to fuel anger and speculation. Unlike John, Robert Thompson has managed to avoid further legal trouble and has remained out of the public eye since his release. Reports suggest that he has adapted to a quiet life, maintaining anonymity and avoiding controversy. While some see this as evidence of successful rehabilitation, others argue that it does not absolve him of his past actions. The silence surrounding Robert's life raises questions about whether true reform is possible for someone who participated in such a brutal crime. The murder of James Bulger left an indelible mark on British society. It sparked widespread outrage, led to changes in how juvenile offenders are handled, and raised troubling questions about the roots of evil. The case also highlighted the importance of early intervention in dysfunctional families to prevent future tragedies. James's parents, Denise and Ralph Bulger, have worked tirelessly to keep his memory alive, campaigning for better protection for children and justice for victims of violent crimes. The haunting image of James's innocent face remains a reminder of the fragility of childhood and the need for vigilance. Despite the convictions and years of scrutiny, the James Bulger case leaves behind lingering questions. What drove John Venables and Robert Thompson to commit such a horrific act? Could earlier intervention have prevented this tragedy? And can society ever fully reconcile with the idea of children as perpetrators of monstrous crimes? As time passes, the case remains a somber reflection of humanity's darkest capabilities and the ongoing struggle to balance justice, rehabilitation, and protection. For James's family, the pain endures, a testament to the profound loss caused by an act of unimaginable cruelty. Shadow Mysteries, unraveling the horrifying mysteries of crime cases. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to catch the next thrilling and suspenseful episodes.